In Jewish life, when someone dies, we stop everything to mourn. We stop. When my father died unexpectedly in 2017, my family gathered at my home to sit Shiva, to sit together in deep mourning for 7 days after burial. Our entire job for that time was to mourn. And there are clear steps to mourning, prescriptions that create a scaffolding around our grief and our loss to prevent us from either running away from it in an attempt to escape our own pain, or conversely, to get lost in the sea of that pain. For the first 7 days after the funeral, we tear our clothing, we stop shaving and cutting our hair, and we allow others to gather around us to take care of us, to provide meals, and to pray with us. We stop listening to music, we avoid parties, and we punctuate each day with the mourner's prayer. Our tradition does what it can to ensure that we don't try to flee from our most human need to feel and process intense loss. Instead, we're held to it, to move through the steps of grief and come out alive. Many sources of wisdom reassure us that suppressing feelings of loss and pain can lead to even deeper suffering. To be wholehearted, we must face loss, pain, and fear. To delve deeply into mourning is to ensure that we can heal, we can recover, and we can remain wholehearted people. In this time of crisis, layered over crisis, loss overlaid with grief and fear, with isolation and overwhelming uncertainty, we are called to face it, not flee from it. To face our individual and collective brokenness. We need to name it and therefore face it. In Judaism, speech is powerful. We're told that God created the world through words. God said, "Let there be," and there was. In the creation story, after creating the universe, God's first gift to the first person was the power to use words to name the animals, and therefore to classify them. With words, with breath, we can name our fears and our suffering because they too are part of this sacred life. The magic of facing our fears, of delving into suffering, is that we may simultaneously get closer to the source of our pain, but also more distant, so that we can see the larger context, we can see the arc of a full life, and recognize the many sources of joy. Jewish life instructs us to not only face the difficult, but to also stop and pause, to orient ourselves around right values, and to lean into community. One of the most powerful spiritual gifts of Judaism is Shabbat, the Sabbath. We are given the gift of rest, a release from labor, a sweet, sacred pause. From sundown Friday night to sundown Saturday night, we're invited to turn off our electronics, simplify our lives, gather with our loved ones, and focus on rest, family, healing, revitalization. It was that practice that turned the Israelites, that helped them transition from slavery into liberation. As they journeyed, the Sabbath let their minds and their souls catch up with their now free bodies. Sabbath allowed them to pause and internalize what it meant to be free people. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel talked about Shabbat as a sanctuary in time. We don't worship places or people, but we do hold as sacred the passage of time. One concept of Sabbath is that it gives us permission one day each week to live as if our work were finished. Another idea is that it forces humility. We simply can't finish all the work there is to do. The task is too big. It's overwhelming. There's too much to do. But what we did the previous week will need to be enough for now. It's insufficient, but it's all we could do. One of my favorite teachings in Judaism is one credited to Rabbi Simcha Bunim, a Polish Hasidic master from the turn of the 18th century. He's credited with saying that we should each have 2 pockets and a note in each pocket. On one note is written, Bishvili nivra ha'olam, the world was created for me. And on the other are the words, V'anochi afar v'nefer, I am but dust and ashes. The world was created for me. I am unique and valuable and powerful. I am but dust and ashes. I'm a small creature in a large world. I'm flesh and blood, and when my living is done, I will return to the earth. This is a call for humility. The call to action in this story is to constantly assess which message we need to hear at which moment. When we're feeling low and powerless, we need to know that we matter. And when we're feeling triumphant, we need to know we're not such a big deal. Humility is a central Jewish value, as is study, the charge to keep learning, and perhaps most importantly, the commandment to be a blessing. To be a blessing is to bring more light to the world, to transform holiness from some elevated, breathy concept to the oxygen in our very human interactions. We come to know God by knowing people. We find comfort in community. We understand our purpose in community. We find healing and spiritual health in community. Community is so important as we move through crisis that there are prayers that we can only say in a group. The mourner's prayer, for example, is one of those. In our moments of deepest grief, we are called to be in community. In community, we can serve others. We can do our part to make the world more just. We can think less of ourselves and more about others, and we can take actions of loving kindness. These are the things that provide comfort and healing. Facing our loss and our pain, pausing, embracing our uniqueness and also our humility, studying, and leaning into community. I wish for us all, no matter what our tradition is, no matter what we hold as sacred, I wish for us all comfort, courage, kindness, and the warm embrace of community.